Hello, friends. It's Friday, September 26th. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Tom Lobianco. This is episode 24 of Tom Lobianco Reports. Today on the show, I would usually bring on a guest who is an expert on a specific topic. We've had a range of excellent guests this week. Alexandra Crawford, Tom Hartman, Mike Madrid. So many great experts in their areas. Today you've got me. I'm the expert. We're going to be talking about why President Donald Trump chose to force a prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey. That is our top story. Before we get to that, I want to remind everybody to please head on over to 24site.news. Make sure you sign up. All right. Get all the emails. Get the shows when they come out. Catch us every day here live on Substack and YouTube at noon Eastern time. And then again at 8 p.m. Eastern on Political Voices Network on YouTube. And thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure having you here. Before we go deep on Russia and Trump and Comey, let's get to the news of the day. It is incredibly important to note, as I share the screen here, let's go to this. First off, Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, has ordered everybody, all the generals, to a rare meeting here in the DMV. A lot of questions about this right now. For that, we go to the Washington Post. Quote, headline, Hegseth orders rare urgent meeting of hundreds of generals, admirals. The Pentagon has summoned military officials from around the world for a gathering in Virginia. Byline, Tara Kopp, Dan Lamothe, Alex Horton, Ellen Nakashima, and Noah Robertson. Hegseth ordered hundreds of U.S. military generals and admirals to gather on short notice without a stated reason at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week, sowing confusion and alarm. The highly unusual directive was sent to virtually all of the military's top commanders worldwide, according to more than a dozen people familiar with the matter. It was issued earlier this week against the backdrop of a potential government shutdown, and as Hegseth's overtly political moves have deepened a sense of distress among his opponents who fear that he is erasing the Defense Department's status as a nonpartisan institution. In a statement Thursday, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell affirmed that, quote, that Hegseth will, quote, be addressing his senior military leaders early next week, but he offered no additional details. Parnell, a senior advisor to the defense secretary, voiced no security concerns about the Washington Post reporting on the meeting, scheduled for Tuesday in Quantico, Virginia. So, folks, I'm sure you've heard about this. There's a lot of confusion about this. This could potentially be big, or it could potentially be nothing. We just don't know yet. I'm going to say the same thing that I've said so often about so many big news events here over the last few weeks. The Charlie Kirk shooting, the shooting at the Dallas ICE facility. We have to wait and see as we get information. And I will be updating as we get that information. Let the politicians go out there and run their mouths and make wild claims. All right, that is their prerogative. That is protected under the First Amendment, just the same as is protected under the First Amendment for Jimmy Kimmel to ruthlessly mock President Donald Trump, as he has continued to do now that he is back on the air. All right, our big story. Prosecutors secured an indictment, or prosecutor, I should note, secured an indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. Headline from the New York Times, grand jury indicts longtime Trump target, former FBI Director James Comey. The move came after the president intensifies pressure on his pressure campaign on the Justice Department in recent days, publicly demanding that top officials prosecute Mr. Comey. Byline, Devlin Barrett, Glenn Thrush, and Alan Fuhr. A federal grand jury on Thursday indicted James B. Comey, the former FBI director, a culmination of President Trump's relentless demand for retribution after the Bureau investigated his 2016 presidential campaign over possible ties to Russia, which we'll be talking about more in just a few minutes. Mr. Comey was indicted on one count of making a false statement and one count of obstruction of a congressional proceeding in connection with his testimony before a Senate committee in September 2020. The indictment filed in Alexandria, Virginia, came over the objection of career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia who found insufficient evidence to support charges but were overruled by Lindsey Halligan, a Trump loyalist handpicked by the president to run the office a few days ago. It represents the most significant legal step yet by the Trump administration to harry, punish, and humiliate a former official the president has identified as an enemy at the expense of procedural safeguards intended to shield the Justice Department from political interference and personal vendettas. We've heard from President Trump extensively on this. He has tweeted that he believes Comey is guilty of something without explaining exactly what, that he is evil and bad. And he's made statements recently that he is, quote, sick, but the evidence appears to be a little thin here. A lot of questions on whether this will be a successful prosecution in court. And for that, let's hear from, sorry guys, let me fix my camera here. I didn't realize it dropped out here. Here, we're going to go to the FaceTime camera here. All right. For that, we go to James Comey himself.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Again, that's former FBI Director James Comey posted to his social media accounts yesterday. A lot developing on this. I would note that legal experts, former federal prosecutors across the board, have noted not only how hard it would be to actually secure a conviction against Comey here on these allegations and these successful charges, 2 out of 3 that were secured yesterday by Trump's prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsey Halligan. But as Comey himself noted, this will be coming out in court. We're going to be hearing about it. So make sure to keep it here as we proceed through this. Apologies for the technical difficulties there earlier. Don't know what happened with the other camera, so we're back to the backup here. I'm Tom Lobianco. This is Tom Lobianco Reports. A reminder, you can find us at 24site.news. Sign up for the email over there. Subscribe, help to support independent journalism as we make sure that we continue to protect and enact and defend and use our First Amendment rights. That is the bedrock of America. You can find us every day here live at noon on Substack and on YouTube at 24site, and also on the replay every day at 8 p.m. on Political Voices Network. Normally, I would be having on an expert here, but today you've got me. I'm going to be the expert. I titled this show Russia, Russia, Russia because in some ways, this is exactly what I've been covering for a decade. Um, there's a joke among some of us reporters that have been covering Trump for a long time now, a decade, really, that 2016 never ended. A little while ago, I had Julie Mason, host of the Julie Mason Show, on the podcast here, and we were talking about a joke that longtime reporter Jackie Kucinich is now over at the Boston Globe said that what if in 2016 we all died and what we're living in right now is just a simulation? I can't get that out of my head. It would not be the strangest thing that's happened. Okay. And I'm absolutely looking into the wrong camera because that one's not working right now. We'll have to get that fixed another time. Here we go on the backup. So I figured let's go deep. And this is not going to be one show, but I think it's really important. And this is something that we do as journalists. It's something, no matter the platform, no matter where we are, whether this is on YouTube, on Apple or Spotify, whether you're reading it in the hard copy of the New York Times, whether you're reading it on your, however you're getting this, one of the most important things that we do is to summarize and explain and clarify very complicated things. Reality is often complicated. It would be nice if it was simple as a Super Bowl or a World Series. You have a score at the end of each one. All right. You know the winner, you know the loser. But that's sports. Politics is different. Global affairs is different. And things dealing with Trump and Russia are very foggy by design. I would know by design. I started on this covering the 2016 presidential campaign at CNN. Went to a number of Trump rallies, covered a lot. If you check out the photos, the YouTube card on each one of these shows, that's me at the Republican convention in Cleveland interviewing Senator Mike Lee at one of the big pivot points, which I would argue effectively cemented Trump, and not only as the nominee, but as the president who we have now. That was in July of 2016, 2 days before he accepted the nomination. There was a effort to derail him by Ted Cruz, the Ted Cruz delegates, and the then big Ted Cruz fan, Mike Lee. Things have changed a lot since then. It's almost a decade later. But I was there for the middle. I was there for all of it. I was there in the middle of all of this. At the time, I remember you'd hear a little bit of chatter about Russia's involvement in the election. But that was the beginning of this modern era of insanity politics where things seem to go a mile a minute. So it would be easy to not pay attention to it. We missed thousands of us covering this thing, covering all aspects of the news. It was easy to miss. All right. It was very easy to miss. But it turned out to be one of the most important aspects of our modern politics and why we are here today. Why do we have a sitting United States president directing what appears to be a political prosecution of somebody he doesn't like? I would note he has also targeted others, including New York Attorney General Letitia James, who oversaw the investigation of his tax fraud in New York. He's going after now U.S. Senator, California Senator Adam Schiff, who used to be the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee when they were investigating Trump and the Trump campaign for alleged Russia ties to Putin. He goes after perceived enemies, anyone that he does not like. We saw that with Jimmy Kimmel. But there really are a lot of ties going back to Russia. So I want to hear from, if you follow me and you know my reporting, and I covered this at CNN and then at the Associated Press. The Trump Russia investigations were nuanced and complicated, but in some ways easy to understand. And they were spun actively by then President Trump, and really continue to be now by the President again, Trump, with falsehoods. It's just not right what he says about these things. So I wanted to go back and understand this, because this is the root of the anger, the animosity from Trump against Comey. Recall that if you look at the top of that New York Times story, that was from January of 2017, shortly after Trump took office. And there's a video clip in which he calls out Comey and brings him over. And a few months later, after Comey revealed in testimony that the FBI was actually looking into possible connections, possible support by Vladimir Putin and Russian hackers in support of the Trump campaign in 2016, Trump fired Comey, spurring the bigger investigation, the Mueller investigation, run by special counsel Robert Mueller. This goes deep. This story is very foundational to Trump and our modern politics, and impossible to avoid. But I want to point to, and folks who know me, uh, listen to this podcast, they read the 24 site newsletter. I often point to the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on what happened. To those of us who cover this story and experts in this arena, that is the best, most comprehensive detailing of what went down. What really happened? And I used to get questions about this pretty routinely. The hell might might happen again, seeing as we're going through a prosecution of a central player in the middle of that story. What was it? Was this something where the sitting president of the United States had been enlisted as a spy by a foreign adversary? Was it something like that? No, that's not. No. Was it completely fabricated by some shadowy Illuminati? Something out of a QAnon 4chan chat? Nope, not that either. I often likened it to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, neither of whom are involved in this, I should note. But sports analogies are good for politics sometimes. Okay, they have nothing to do with this. All right, when you're on the field, the coach doesn't have to tell a quarterback where his end zone is. All right, you don't have to tell him which way to throw the ball. All right, you know where you're headed. And back in 2016, regardless of any direct evidence of collusion, and that's not what the investigations found. That is a straw man that was put up by Trump. Trump and Putin were heading in the same direction, looking to put the ball in the very same end zone. So I figured, let's go back in time. Let's hear from former Senate Intelligence Vice Chairman Mark Warner. He's still there. This is the 2017. This is his opening statement for when Comey testified. And let's go here.
The truth is, many Americans who may be tuning in today probably haven't focused on every twist and turn of the investigation. So I'd like to briefly describe, at least from this senator's standpoint, what we already know and what we're still investigating. To be clear, this investigation is not about relitigating the election. It's not about who won or lost, and it sure as heck is not about Democrats versus Republicans. We're here because a foreign adversary attacked us right here at home, plain and simple, not by guns or missiles, but by foreign operatives seeking to hijack our most important democratic process, our presidential election. Russian spies engaged in a series of online cyber raids and a broad campaign of disinformation, all ultimately aimed at sowing chaos to undermine public faith in our process, in our leadership, and ultimately in ourselves. And that's not just this senator's opinion. It is the unanimous determination of the entire U.S. intelligence community. So we must find out the full story. What the Russians did, and candidly, as some other colleagues have mentioned, why they were so successful. And more importantly, we must determine the necessary steps to take to protect our democracy and ensure they can't do it again. Chairman mentioned elections in 2018 and 2020. In my home state of Virginia, we have elections this year in 2017. Simply put, we cannot let anything or anyone prevent us from getting to the bottom of this. Now, Mr. Comey, let me say at the outset, we haven't always agreed on every issue. In fact, I've occasionally questioned some of the actions you've taken. But I've never had any reason to question your integrity, your expertise, or your intelligence. You've been a straight shooter with this committee and have been willing to speak truth to power, even at the risk of your own career, which makes the way in which you were fired by the president ultimately shocking. Recall, we began this entire process with the president and his staff first denying that the Russians were ever involved and then falsely claiming that no one from his team was ever in touch with any Russians. We know that's just not the truth. Numerous Trump associates had undisclosed contacts with Russians before and after the election, including the president's attorney general, his former national security advisor, and his current senior advisor, Mr. Kushner. That doesn't even begin to count the host of additional campaign associates and advisors who've also been caught up in this massive web. We saw Mr. Trump's campaign manager, Mr. Manafort, forced to step down over ties to Russian-backed entities. The national security advisor, General Flynn, had to resign over his lies about engagements with the Russians. And we saw the candidate himself express an odd and unexplained affection for the Russian dictator while calling for the hacking of his opponent. There's a lot to investigate. Enough, in fact, that then Director Comey publicly acknowledged that he was leading an investigation into those links between Mr. Trump's campaign and the Russian government. As the director of the FBI, Mr. Comey was ultimately responsible for conducting that investigation, which might explain why you're sitting now as a private citizen. What we didn't know was at the same time that this investigation was proceeding, the president himself appears to have been engaged in an effort to influence or at least co-opt the director of the FBI. The testimony that Mr. Comey has submitted for today's hearing is very disturbing. For example, on January 27th, after summoning Director Comey to dinner, the president appears to have threatened the director's job while telling him, quote, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." At a later meeting on February 14th, the president asked the attorney general to leave the Oval Office so that he could privately ask Director Comey, again, quote, to see way clear to letting Flynn go. That is a statement that Director Comey interpreted as a request that he drop the investigation connected to General Flynn's false statements. Think about it. The President of the United States asking the FBI director to drop an ongoing investigation. And after that, the President called the FBI director on 2 additional occasions, March 30th and April 11th, and asked him again, quote, to lift the cloud on the Russia investigation. Now, Director Comey denied each of these improper requests. The loyalty pledge, the admonition to drop the Flynn investigation, the request to lift the cloud on the Russia investigation. Of course, after his refusals, Director Comey was fired. The initial explanation for the firing didn't pass any smell test. Somehow Director Comey was fired because he didn't treat Hillary Clinton appropriately. Of course, that explanation lasted about a day because the president himself then made very clear that he was thinking about Russia when he decided to fire Director Comey.
That probably sounds very familiar, very similar to what we're hearing right now. That was 8 years ago at the beginning of Trump's first term. Again, I say none of this is really new. But to understand the connections, you really have to go back to the 2016 election and all of the interactions therein. We're going to be going deeper on this in future episodes, and I'll be bringing on some guests who are experts in this area to help us understand what happened. Something I want to point out that Senator Warner mentioned there in his very comprehensive opening statement was about the disinformation. Now, this was at a time when folks were really working very hard to combat this somewhat novel tactic of Russians infiltrating foreign elections, our election. If you go back to the Mueller and the one major criminal indictment that Mueller filed, of course, you couldn't really actually secure any convictions, but against the Internet Research Agency, which was the Russian troll farm put together by Putin and a man named Evgeny Prigozhin, who would later die in a fiery crash over Belarus after unsuccessfully leading a military coup against Putin and then backing off amid promises that he would not die. I think for most folks with some understanding of world affairs, Putin is not somebody you take at his word, or any word for that matter, not to be trusted. Disinformation is a centerpiece now. Prigozhin led that effort 8-9 years ago. I mean, I recall you had protests sprouting up inside the United States that were organized by Russians. That's detailed in the indictment. Hell, this past election, we had 2 of the most prominent media people posing as journalists. They're not really journalists, of course. Some might even call them fake news, but longtime political operatives, Tim Pool and Benny Johnson, who were paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by what ultimately turned out to be a Kremlin-funded outlet here in the United States. Now, I would note that Johnson and Poole both said they were victims. They did not realize that the money was coming from the Kremlin. And this is not, it's impossible to, lead a prosecution of anybody on a podcast, on a YouTube. This is only to point out that the disinformation warfare, the PSYOPs warfare from Russia never ended. And it continues today. And not just here. an important story from NewsGuard, which is a website which rates and identifies political leanings, does fact checks. It's a very good resource for anybody who wants to, in this clouded, intentionally clouded media environment, and wants to understand what's going on. They point out they have a report out today noting that Russian interference in the Moldovan elections have increased incredibly. Tens of millions of views of Russian propaganda now hitting people's phones. And as I've noted here many times before, that is how we get our information now. This is how we perceive reality. So, Russian disinformation, targeted propaganda, remains a major threat to all democracies, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. But let's get back to the news at hand. Why is the President of the United States so angry at James Comey? Something Senator Warner hinted at, pointed to there at the end of his testimony. The initial reason for firing Comey way back in 2017 initially was stated because the sanctity of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Of course, that's not true because Trump himself loved that. And as he later admitted, it was really about trying to get Comey to drop the Russia investigation. Almost seems quaint now, looking back on all of it, especially in the context of what we are living through right now. I want to read a story from Ilya Maritz at ProPublica. This is really, it does a very good job of showing the why of this. Why are we dealing with this? Why is it Russia directing this? Why not China? And certainly there are Chinese foreign influence operations. That is not shocking at all. But why Russia? Why is Russia so adamant about this? Take a look at this from ProPublica. Continues to be one of the best news outlets in the world, a trusted news outlet. Let's go here. Headline, let's recall what exactly Paul Manafort and Rudy Giuliani were doing in Ukraine. Ilya Maritz, March 1st, 2022, in ProPublica. Trump's former campaign chairman and former lawyer worked with, between them, a deposed authoritarian president, a bevy of oligarchs, Russia-oriented politicians, and alleged Russian spies. Though Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is just days old, Russia has been working for years to influence and undermine the independence of its smaller neighbor. As it happens, some Americans have played a role in that effort. One was former President Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Another was Trump's then lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. It's all detailed in a wide array of public documents, particularly a bipartisan 2020 Senate report on Trump and Russia. I was one of the journalists who dug into all the connections as part of the Trump Inc. podcast with ProPublica and WNYC. This is Ilya Maritz, in Kyiv, retracing Manafort's steps when Trump's infamous call with Ukraine's president was revealed in September 2019. That, of course, was the call between Trump and Zelensky, which spurred his first impeachment. America is making money abroad. What's the problem? Manafort, longtime Republican lobbyist who developed, especially working with unsavory, undemocratic clients, in 2004 was hired by oligarchs supporting a pro-Russian party in Ukraine. The Party of Regions needed an image makeover. They've been marred by allegations of fraud committed in favor of the party's candidate, prompting a popular revolt that became known as the Orange Revolution. In a memo for the Ukraine's reportedly richest man, Rinat Akhmatov, Manafort summed up the polling Respondents said they associated the Party of Regents with corruption and considered it the party of oligarchs. Manafort set to work rebranding the party with poll-tested messaging and improved stagecraft, and before long, the Party of Regents was in power in Kyiv. This, of course, would be in 2014 with Yanukovych. A key aide in Ukraine for Manafort was allegedly a Russian spy, Konstantin Kilimnik, both a Russian intelligence officer and an integral part of Manafort's operations in Russia and Ukraine. Kilimnik has denied he is a Russian spy. Indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller for obstruction of justice, allegedly trying to get witnesses to lie in testimony to prosecutors in the Manafort case. This, of course, would be the separate case which was spun out of the Trump-Russia investigations involving tax fraud by Manafort. That is a separate, but was discovered in this investigation almost 8 years ago now. Kilimnik, who lives in Moscow, has not been arrested and said he's still confused why I was pulled into this mess. This is 2014. Here's Manafort. I'm going to skip past a little bit of this. That's a different rabbit hole. As you know, it's my job to take us down certain rabbit holes and bring us back up for air periodically. This is how Manafort gets plugged in to the Trump campaign back in 2016, working with Tom Barrack. Quote, "We were going to have so much fun and change the world." A few months later, the Trump campaign stops proposed language in the party platform that would express support for arming Ukraine with defensive weapons. One Trump campaign aide told Mueller Trump's view was the Europeans should take primary responsibility for any assistance to Ukraine, that there should be improved U.S. relations, and they did not want to start World War III over that region. I have to tell you that sounds an awful lot like where we are right now. And all of that nuance, by the way. Again, as I noted earlier, politics, global politics, the affairs of two massive superpowers, nuclear powers, often foggy, conflicted, contradictory, nuanced. This is not a sports game, even though sometimes folks like myself like to use those analogies. Let's move down to Manafort was ultimately canned. Let's advance to a few years ahead. Giuliani starts working behind the scenes for Trump, trying to basically force Ukraine to investigate Hunter Biden. Working with folks you might have heard of before, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, to make contacts in Ukraine with corrupt and questionable prosecutors to turn up dirt on Hunter Biden. Of course, I would note, this is before this became a a cold open to Saturday Night Live. Parnas and Fruman told the president at a donor dinner in 2018 the U.S. ambassador in Kyiv was a liability. They should get rid of him. A few months later, Trump recalled Maria Yovanovitch, who had been a vocal opponent of corruption in Ukraine, from Kyiv in May 2019. And 2 months later, Trump had his infamous call with Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky asked Trump for anti-tank Javelin missiles. Trump said he needed Zelensky first to, quote, "do us a favor and initiate investigations that would be damaging to Joe Biden." He also pressed Zelensky to meet with Giuliani, according to the call. Guys, I'm going to stop us here for now. Okay. The reason I'm talking about all this, why are we going back in history? Why are we diving down a rabbit hole? Something which I would note a number of folks continue to dismiss as a, quote, as a hoax. Well, It's for the same reason I continue to report about January 6th. You know, at the beginning of this second Trump term, a number of folks say, don't talk about January 6th. It's old news. Well, on his first day in office, Trump made it relevant news. The President of the United States pardoned all the rioters who attacked the United States Capitol, many of them violently, some of whom later went on to commit further crimes after being pardoned by the president. The president made it relevant. That's the same thing here. We have to understand this relationship between Trump and Comey to understand why we are witnessing this historic political prosecution by a United States president against the former FBI director, somebody he has deemed to be an enemy of him, not of the United States, of him. Thanks for being here, folks. We're going to be digging in deep on this as we go along. I'm going to be wrapping up for the weekend here. Before I head out, we're coming up next week, going to be airing an interview with Shasti Conrad, who is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee regarding Asian American voters, their voter sentiments. Of course, that was a major demographic which shifted towards Trump last year. We've got two big elections happening in Virginia and New Jersey, so I'm going to be talking with Shasti about what she's seeing out there, what she's hearing, what the Democrats are hoping for in regards to this. Want to say a big thanks to all of our wonderful guests this week: Mike Madrid, Lexi Hudson, Tom Hartman, Matt Lewis of Matt Lewis and the News. If you missed anything, head on over to 24site.news. You can catch all the shows over there. Head on over to Political Voices Network. If you showed up late today, you can always catch the replay at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. And I want to thank you guys. Thanks for being here, because I can't do this without you. Your support is what makes this all possible. When a power no less than the United States government comes after free media, be it comedians, be it threats against our oldest news networks, CBS, ABC, we have to continue doing this. We have to continue using the First Amendment. This is bedrock to who we are as Americans. And I'm honored to be here with you. I want to say a big thanks to Ian Walters, Karen Walters. Ian, not with us this week because proud papa again. So love you guys. Thank you for all your work, all your dedication. And Ian will be back soon. So we're not doing comments at the end of the show today. I am running the board. Maybe I will find that clip of Howard Stern from his 1990s movie. And I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor, let me give you my email. Okay. Email me. If you have any questions, folks, you can find me here. All right. You have anything you'd like to see? You have any comments? If you'd like to support independent journalism, find me here, Tom at 24site.news. All right. Hit me up. I'm here for your comments. We're doing this together. If you'd like to support independent journalism, get in touch. I'm going to move to our sponsors now with big thanks. Big thanks to our first sponsors of 24site News for supporting independent journalism. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Beth Solomon. She is the author of From Fired to Fabulous. We did an ad campaign a few months ago, and I want to point you to her book, from fired to fabulous. If you have been doged, illegally, I might add, for a number of folks, these challenges are still working their way. Or if you think you might be doged again, seeing as we're at the verge of a shutdown, possible government shutdown, and the White House is saying that they're going to fire even more people if that happens, get in touch with Beth. Go check out her book, From Fired to Fabulous. She is a former C-suite executive, former speechwriter for longtime Senator Sam Nunn, and she has worked numerous jobs, has also been fired from jobs. So she knows what this is like. She knows about how to pick yourself up, how to dust yourself off, and how to either get back into whatever career or ever workplace you're trying to get into or set out on your own. Okay. Just incredible. It's an incredible handbook, very useful. Also, want to say a big thanks to Manoj over at projectmanagemymove.com. Folks, you might not know about this, and I didn't know about this until I talked with Manoj about this. There are these things called distress sales. Okay, and a distress sale is when you have the house goes up for sale either because it's a death in the family, a divorce, something else really tragic happening in your personal life. All right, which you have to deal with. All right, you got to deal with stuff, but in the rush to get things taken care of, sometimes you don't always get the full value of your home in that sale. So this is where Manoj comes in with projectmanagemymove.com. So Manoj has worked in this industry, and what he does is he will work with the contractors. He will coordinate stuff even as simple as just painting the place. He will coordinate with the contractors to improve the look of the house, and in the process, potentially increase the sale value tens of thousands of dollars. All right. That's money that you're leaving on the table. All right. So Manoj gets everybody together, helps make the place look real nice, and gets you the money that you deserve for it. So go check out projectmanagemymove.com. All right, guys. I'm Tom LoBianco. This is episode 24. Tom LoBianco Reports. Head on over, get the email. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It is an absolute privilege, but it is also our right as Americans. I'll see you on